Hello, everybody. This is Bronislava. I had to stop my podcast number 3, and I had to go and cut it into 2 pieces. And this is part number 2. It was so long; it was over 2 hours long, and it was just too long. So we are continuing today with podcast number 3, part 2. All right. I hope you will enjoy it. So join me, join Kelly, Afifa, and Lynee, and have fun.
In the knit group, I had shown my progress on your sweater, and someone had mentioned that the blue in here, that it looks like a tile, that's considered mosaic. What do you think? Is that mosaic? I've never seen it.
It's technically part of mosaic knitting, but I'm just, I don't really categorize what I'm doing. I put like a circular yoke sweater is not really designed to do what you're doing with it. It's designed for color work, for traditional color work, because for each segment, your stitch count is staying the same. And that's very important when you're following a chart and doing repeats to make sure that it's even all the way around. So in this, I liked the stitch pattern, so I threw in a sweater. But yeah, you will find how you create mosaic is usually with slip stitches. Now I'm going to start saying drop stitches.
I'm sorry.
But yeah, that's technically called a chain stitch because of the way it goes, kind of, it pinches in between.
I like that, the column in between, the pinch in between. It's really cool.
It's just fun, that's how I do stuff. I'm like, this is kind of fun. Let's throw it in a sweater. So.
It is. I like it. And speaking of these stitches, when it comes to increases, Bronislava, for color work, I've never seen it in a pattern, but I'm assuming it's somewhere in someone's pattern. How do you do an increase in color work?
Well, you can
would normally, or is there something special that needs to be done?
I think that, when you do the stranded color work in yoke, right? You have to increase. So the designer usually goes and writes, make one right, make one left, and so you have to follow that. And because, if you're knitting top down, you have to increase this area. So you have to obviously add stitches in between. And the color work is also designed in such way that it flows really nicely. I don't know.
It has yarn overs to do the increase, which I really like, because I was thinking, how does someone do a make one right, make one left in color work? That would, I don't know, because I haven't done it, it feels as though it would be confusing.
I think
I haven't done it, but doing the yarn overs in the Mad BT is really nice.
Yes, I think that the designer, the process of designing sweater like that, and Afifa probably will strongly agree with me, is that you have to spend a really huge amount of time on figuring out where exactly you will want to have those increases, in which direction, and make them so they look really good in the sweater. What do you think, Afifa?
Well, usually your increases are not going to happen in a row where you're doing your color work. They're going to happen on a transition row. So you'll, for example, if it's a charted pattern, you'll follow the chart for a certain number of rows. Then there'll be a row in one color that's doing your increases. And then you'll follow a chart for your next segment. Because if you put it in the middle of a chart, it's going to kind of mess up all of your counts, and it'll mess up the chart itself. So the way I do it is I put the increases in a transition row.
Yes. So let me go and show you, maybe you can see it over here. So I was doing this pattern right here, and right below the last white stitching, I have increases so every so often. You can see it actually right there. Can you see it?
Mm-hmm.
This way.
That would be considered the transition row?
Yes, yes. I don't have any color work in, I think actually I do have in between color work right here, right there. And I'm, okay, let me go and do it like this. Here, 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 just in between. And also here in these, right there. So this is the transitional, but here I have them also in between the color work. And over here I also have every so often.
Now, staying on the subject of charts, Bronislava, because I had to bug you about, it was a test knit that I did. And the chart, I was like, what is this? I can't figure it out. Let me find Bronislava because I don't know what else to do. Looking at a color chart, and all of a sudden I see gray. So it was like stitches 1 through 10, they were gray. And then it was the actual color work. Then it was gray. I was like, what am I supposed to do? Like, am I supposed to slip all these stitches? And then all of a sudden I have this massive float to get to the center where the color work is actually shown on the chart, and then move the stitches in the gray on the other side to then do it all. Like, I could not figure out what to do with those gray blocks on the chart. Can you tell everyone, because I know there's got to be another beginner knitter that's looking at a chart and is like, what is this grayed out box? Or it could be white. There may not be a color there, but your color work is literally in the center of this chart and expands. But what do you do with that left and right blank spot? So
well, we already talked about it in another video. And so I probably will refer people to that particular video. So in a short, the blank, the gray area is basically no stitch area. So you only cast on the stitches that are in the color, and knit the ones in the color, and then you start adding the stitches slowly until it expands. And then again in the you will see where the designer is going to go and tell you where to add those stitches. So, but I think that people should go and watch that video about where we talk about that.
That was a really big help. Thank you again, because I would have been stuck and would have tossed the test knit because I could not figure it out for the life of me. Another question I have for color work. Do you have to be a more intermediate knitter or an advanced knitter? Or do you think a beginner knitter can do crochet, or sorry, not crochet work, color work? Question for anyone. Like, how advanced of a skill, so to speak, is color work?
I think anyone can do color work. It's just a matter of practice. I mean, we can all learn something new. I'm learning something new about knitting almost every single day. So if you're a beginner and you never try color work, you're never going to progress. So you can start with something simple, start with striping, then do some slip stitches, and then just practice with tensioning if you want to do stranded color work. But yeah, I think anybody can do it. If you can read a chart, if you can read a pattern, you can do it. What do you guys think?
Absolutely, I absolutely agree. I think that once you know how to do knit stitches, and let's say once you know how to knit even in a round, you can start introducing a different color and very, very simple. You don't have to do, difficult. This one is very simple, where you do only 3 stitches, and then on the next below you do again 3 stitches, and they kind of, they switch, the colors switch from each other. So, and it's very, very simple, and it's, you know, it's, that's where you basically go and start if you are a beginner or seasoned beginner.
I always say that knitting is just one stitch at a time. And so you know, Bronislava's channel is full of techniques. So if you know what you're searching for and you have a trusted source, then you can just go to YouTube, go to Bronislava's channel and find the technique, and then you'll be able to do it, because this, you know, it's in our DNA. We've been doing this for thousands of years. And once you can cast on, knit, purl, maybe in the round, maybe you don't need that yet, you can definitely start to introduce color work to what you're doing. And I think it's really, really fun. But also I think it depends on the type of knitter you are. I am the laziest knitter I've ever known. I am a total fiber geek. Like, talk to me about fiber and I can talk your ear off. I never get bored talking about it. Obviously, I'm obsessed with sheep, or I wouldn't have them tattooed all over myself. And so for me, it's all about the yarn. And what I tend to knit is very, very simple, because I like to knit in the dark. I like, for me, it's a feel. It's a really kinesthetic thing. And so I tend to I do mindless knitting. I did my first grown-up, I call it my first grown-up piece. I did the Jupiter sweater with, because I knew we were talking about stranded color work, and I also, with my new yarn, wanted to know how my sweater was going to feel in it. And honestly, I like my sweater. I'm going to wear it with pride, but I have to say I did not enjoy the process one little bit. It was just too much concentration for me. I like dumb projects. So a lot of this also depends on, do you want to be mindful or mindless? I'm a mindless, you know, and a lot of people really love the fact that not only are they like exercising the neural pathways that you use for complicated math, but also they're doing something with, you know, perhaps a color work chart or something that they have to concentrate on so hard in such an intense way that everything else disappears. And that gives them that really like wonderful, mindful place. But for me, I'm the opposite. I want to watch some trash TV and knit.
However, like when we were talking about stranded color work for beginners, I remembered that I do have actually a very simple hat with very simple stranded color work in my videos. Yeah.
You know, we've talked a lot about catching floats, and for people who don't know how to do this, do you have like a little technique or a little video to show what that is? Because some people might just think we're talking gibberish.
I will probably make little tiny videos, like I said, just a little example where I'm not gonna be talking, just showing it as we're talking at the right now. But I know that like there are a couple ways that you can go and catch those floats. I think that there is let me see, I wrote down, yeah, it's called trapping floats. And you can either twist them, right? And then there is another one that I've heard of. I've never done it, never ever, which is weaving. So that's a little bit more difficult. But you know, like if you are trying to catch the floats, you can catch those floats by just twisting the knitted stuff. So you have these both yarns crisscrossed, you know.
You literally twist your work.
Yes, you can do that. And also when I am really knitting with doing the stranded color work, I have one yarn on one side and the other yarn on the or keeping them separate so they don't tangle, you know.
I've seen Portuguese, I think it's called Portuguese knitting, where you literally take two, well, I think it only works with two. So if you have two colors, you literally take one and go, around your neck this way, and then take the other one the opposite direction, and it keeps the yarns from twisting. I've tried that, and it's nice to do, but it can start to tighten around your neck. Be mindful of your tension, but that's another.
What a beautiful yarn necklace.
Yeah.
When it comes to staying on that subject, which kind of takes us full circle back to the first question, where Kelly showed us the tools to keep the yarn organized. When it comes to keeping your yarn organized when you're doing color work, any thoughts on combination knitting, where you're knitting continental and English simultaneously versus holding both strands or multiple strand colors on one finger without the finger rings? Because I cannot figure out how to do it without something being attached to my finger. I can do it simultaneously, but that seems to slow me down, even though it's meditative doing that. But any thoughts on those subjects?
Anyone?
I can't do it, but I know others can.
Doing doing simultaneous hands?
Yeah, I'm a thrower, and I which aids me in terms of color work to some extent, but I'm incapable of combining. And maybe I'm not incapable. I'm too lazy to try to learn that technique.
I have tried both techniques. I mean, you know, one continental and English. And my tension with English is completely different than its continental. So I tend to have really horrible looking color work. I do better like if I go and hold both yarns in my continental hand, you know, when I'm knitting continental. I have done it also the way that I would go and drop one yarn and work with one and then switch. But then you have to really watch your floats, how they look in the back, and what you're really trying to do with those floats, you know, because those floats really affect how it looks in the front. And even in this, on this sweater that I have done, I think about 3 or 4 months ago, you can actually see that it puckers. So I don't have much experience in doing all these. And so it doesn't look really the best, you know. I wish I would go and make this much nicer, but I would have to really, really practice making, you know, working on color work, stranded color work. So I'm not extremely experienced in it, but I've done it, you know. I don't know, how much did you do, Afifa?
My tension's also very different if I do continental and English together, so I just keep them on one side. And I did a color work with 5 different colors one time, and I was just basically throwing my skeins over, and then afterwards I would pick up my work and kind of hold it up and let it unwind. So I would do a whole row of color work and then just hold it like this and it would unwind itself. It's, yeah. I don't use any tools or anything other than my skein wranglers, because when I was throwing my colors over, it got a little bit messy.
Yes, yeah, yeah. With lots of
for you, you know.
With lots of colors, it definitely can tangle, but you can go and be much more in control if you have two, maximum 3 colors. In my opinion.
Yeah, true.
But how difficult is it to design color work? I'm just curious.
You're asking me?
You're the designer, yeah.
I use a grid. Sometimes I have a grid paper on my, it's not paper, I have digital grid paper. And if there's, like, for example, my husband is a huge fan of Oingo Boingo.
Oingo
And
Boingo.
it's an 80s band. Have you heard of it, Kelly?
Yes.
Okay, so one of their album covers has this skull with a cowboy hat on, and he's smoking a cigarette. So I found the image online. I took some grid paper. I traced the image onto grid paper, and then I threw it up digitally onto my computer, and I used that to knit a hat for him with that in it. So sometimes I'll come up with an image or a shape or whatever, and I'll graph it. And then I have to figure out all the numbers depending on what I'm knitting. It's a little bit harder with a garment, obviously, because of all the different sizes. But if for an accessory, it's super easy to do. I personally think anybody can do it.
Yeah.
Never mind, I take it back. Only I can do it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense, though, what I said?
Kind of. It sounds very mathematical and technical. That's why you're the designer.
I love grid paper. I'm a weirdo. What can I say?
There are couple websites that you can go and take a picture and you download it into those, and they do it online for you, that they turn it into a grid without you really doing it.
I have not had a lot of success with those.
No?
I feel like I don't have enough control.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it's just a me thing, but yeah, I prefer to do it myself. Like, I've tried that and it's blown up the image and just given me 50 million squares. So I just prefer to do it on my own.
You can control it. You can especially in this one, because I have done a grid for myself that I've been like 3 years. I have this project in my mind that I want to go and do, and never really got to it. But I could control how many squares I want.
Yeah, I still don't like it. I know which one you're talking about. It's just not.
It does. I
like
never done it, but it did not work for you.
It didn't, and because if I'm designing a garment, I'll have a number in mind, and for some reason it just does. I have to do it on paper first for myself.
Mm-hmm.
It's just how my brain works,
mm-hmm.
and then I'll throw it up digitally.
Mm-hmm.
This is getting really long, you guys.
Yes, I know.
We need to wrap it up.
An hour. Has it been? It's been an hour. We started at
An
1
hour and a half.
hour and a
Yeah.
half.
Yeah.
I have 6 questions. 6 questions from a
You're gonna
viewer.
ask 2.
Ask 2 of the 6. Okay.
It's going and going.
We can make it into 2 videos maybe, and Bronislava can cut it in. But I have 6 questions from a viewer. So the first one is for FIFA. When creating a pattern, how do you determine how many colors you plan to use? Is there a typical recipe, so to speak, that you go by? What is your creative process when designing color work patterns, and what's your inspiration? Where does it come from, your inspiration?
I try not to do more than 2 or 3 colors but just because handling more than 2 or 3 colors is a pain. And for knitters like Kelly, they're not going to want to do more than 2. So, and 2 just shows off better, but you can alternate 2, like go 2 colors here, 2 colors here, 2 colors here. And inspiration is kind of, I don't know, I see things and I'm like, that would look really cool in a sweater. And then I put it in a sweater. Or I'll see, I follow a lot of like fashion blogs and stuff. So like for the next season, I'll see something and be like, oh, that would be a really cool shape to try and bring into knitting. And I do a lot of my work that way, where like the shape of a skirt or the shape of a top, and then I'll try and translate that into a knit fabric. So that's, yeah. Ideas sometimes just pop into my head. And I'm always like, how do I construct that? Like, how can I make that happen as a knitted item? Like, that's the challenge for me usually. Does that answer your question?
I think it does. I think it answers her question.
All right.
Next question for Bronislava. When teaching color work patterns, what do you feel most students have trouble with? A beginner trying to find, as a beginner trying to find their first color work pattern, any advice you would give them? 2-part question. So the most difficult things that you see with students, and do you have any suggestions for a beginner pattern for a beginner color work knitter?
I think that the beginner of color work, first they should go and learn how to knit in the round, because doing stranded color work back and forth is like going back on the wrong side and on purl side is more difficult than doing it always on the knit side. So I think that it's better for them to go and first learn how to knit in the round, and so they can go and practice color work knitting in a round, always in a knit, with doing the knit stitch. And like, let's say hat, okay? I would probably say hat would be the easiest. What is the hardest for them is probably the tension, to keeping the stitch from each other, in the same distance, and those floats that they are same distance, or they are not puckering which I myself have the same problem because I don't do it often. And then like we said, practice, 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 and then it will make perfect. So I would go and probably say, go and make lots of baby hats and give them to your friends, and then move on to bigger as you get handle of it, then you can go and start working on bigger projects.
That was a question that she actually had for me, which ties into yours. What do you find some of the challenges to be when knitting color work patterns? A question for me, which is exactly what you had mentioned, Bronislava, tension. When I first started doing color work, it was one, figuring out how to hold the yarn, not having the tools like Kelly has, and then trying to figure out tension. And then, like Afifa said, catching floats every 4 or 5. And overall, like everyone has said, it's a matter of practicing. It's learning a new skill. For Kelly, variegated yarn question. So it's on your fiber. When dyeing variegated yarn, do you have a pattern in mind? So when you dye the yarn, you aim to put the various dye colors in the certain places so it knits up in your color work a certain way. So basically when you're dyeing your yarn and you're thinking, okay, I want to do color work, how are you dyeing it so it goes in your color work the way that you want it when it comes to variegated yarns or solid colors?
There are some people who dye yarn to create patterns. I don't. Typically mine is just trying to make beautiful yarn.
Which it is.
Thanks.
So to jump on that, how do you, for instance, with the FIFAs, I asked you what colors would go best, because that's a challenge that I have, trying to figure out what colors to put into a pattern if I don't necessarily want to just mimic what's being shown on the pattern.
Mm-hmm.
And I want something different. How do you, as a yarn shop owner, help us to figure out what colors would go good in a colorwork pattern?
Yeah, I think it goes back to our previous, was it the first or the second of our videos where we were talking about combining colors and what works in terms of like contrast and so on and so forth. So I think a lot of that is, you know, depending upon what you want the outcome to be in terms of like high contrast, low contrast, etc. So
let's see, the last question in here, it's another variegated yarn question. Do you have to vary or change your knitting pattern based on multicolored yarn being used in a colorwork pattern? Or should you use variegated yarn in a colorwork pattern?
I think variegated yarn can look beautiful in a pattern. And again, it's just where you're placing it and what is it next to, and then letting the yarn do the work. I think it can be really, really beautiful.
Do you have any?
I wouldn't necessarily do color work with two variegated yarns. So for example, like have the variegated be your background and then have a tonal or a semi-solid on top, or the other way.
Yeah.
So that you can actually see the color work. Otherwise it's all going to kind of blend together.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to say, that it's really great to go and have that variegated yarn, and Kelly probably could go and pick another color that would totally beautifully complement this variegated yarn, and then work with that, which actually, you know, when we were talking about, when Afifa was saying, I was working with five different colors. Well, the variegated color can have those 5 colors that Afifa was working before, right? And now she has only 2 colors, but I mean two yarns, but 5-6 colors in it. So it can be absolutely gorgeous, in my opinion.
What was the most challenging colorwork project you guys ever did? You said the juniper sweater, correct, Kelly?
It's not a particularly challenging sweater. It's just that I usually do quite mindless stuff, and I had to pay attention, and I don't enjoy having to pay attention.
What about you guys?
Well, I think this one was one of my most challenging, because it, it has, you know, several different, actually this is same like this one, and then this, but and then I did one more, I think, but really long time ago. I don't have it. What about you? What about
It was the first one. It was the first one that I did. That's why.
Oh, the birds.
Yeah, there were like little stems and little birdies perched on them. It was super cute, but it did not turn out super cute because of me. I'm bringing this to an end, you guys. This has been super long.
It has.
Yes. I want to say one more thing. If you don't want to go and work with color work, but you still want to go and have a color work, do a self-striping socks. Because self-striping socks, I mean, yarn is going to go and do it for you. Well, are we going to wrap it up, ladies? Poor Afifa, she's suffering.
I gotta go feed my kids.
And okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's learn.
Choose great yarn.
Find great patterns.
And knit and crochet.
And thank you very much for watching our video, subscribing, commenting, following us on social media, and don't forget to check all the links below the video. Oh my gosh!
What was I? Let's learn.
Let's do it again.
Senator.
Okay.
I think that's it.
I gotta go pee.